The 2024 report, which basically published the top most expensive cities in the world to build in. And in a surprise to no one, London won.
Hey. More wildly, Bristol is 10th. Bristol. Like, that does not make sense.
Small sample size. That one job went massively over budget.
Yeah.
Welcome back to the Offsite Podcast. Carlos, how are you, sir? Good to see you.
Very well, thanks. How are you doing?
I cannot complain. I'm counting down the days till I get to come over and visit you all in the UK.
In-person podcast episode.
Yeah, that's what we're coming over for. We're going to do the whole trip, leaving the family at home for 2 weeks, mainly just so we could record a podcast episode.
Completely reasonable.
No. Yeah, well worth it. Mate, what have you been reading in the news this week? Anything interesting?
One standout must be the base that China and Russia are going to build on the moon.
What?
Which they claim over 6 trips they're going to build a huge sort of base on the moon, like full construction project. And it's a bit limited in terms of like the scope, as you would expect from a project like that. But it's like a base. You'd assume it would be easier to launch missions and things like that from the moon rather than trying to like exit our atmosphere every time.
Would you assume that? It just seems like all of the stuff you'd need to launch it on this planet. Gravity aside,
I think Elon Musk said that before. That's the only reason I've assumed. I didn't come up with that myself.
Like if I could imagine a giant pros and cons list of launching from Earth or launching from the moon. Yeah, I'm sure the moon's got less gravity, but all of the other shit in the list would be like the people, all the bits for the rocket.
Yeah. And you have to take the rocket there in the first place.
Yeah. We have to get it all to that spot anyway. Yeah. It's like that that riddle where you've got like the chicken and the fox and the boat, and you got to go back and forth and get it all from one side to the other.
Yeah. But I think the new Musk rockets, they're like multi-use, right? Compared to the old traditional ones. So I guess the assumption is once you're there, you're doing lots of trips with relatively low amounts of fuel. Because I think most
you still need to get to the stuff to there.
Yeah. But then once you're there, you could do like 50 trips without
like Uber Pool. You'd Uber Pool it over there, and then you could do the separate.
Yeah. The thing that made me think was in this article that I read, it said other countries have been invited to join the party. There's no mention of the US, so either it's not that true or they've gone, this is a stupid idea.
I would love to have been in the room when they were discussing priorities, right? So they're doing the like budgeting exercise. Someone's like, we really need like a new dam, a big railway, we've got like this food issue. And then someone's like, we've also got that like moon-based project. How that made the cut.
He said in 2026 they're sending a team up to do surveys. I'd love to see the tender for that. The old GI team out. But anyway.
Oh, yeah. In typical construction fashion, it'll be 700 subcontracted contracts down to this one like solo contractor surveyor that's going to go up.
Yeah. I'd be definitely pushing through the cost reimbursable contract on that one.
Yeah.
Like, who knows?
Yeah. Oh, very good. Well, that was not something I had been that had not fed into my normal news channel. So that's good to know. Awesome. So today we've got 3 topics to cover back to back in a slightly different format, and all 3 we couldn't decide basically which of the 3 topics, and so screw it, we'll do all 3. So first up, we're going to dive into this acquisition by the sort of massive North American contractor Turner, where they've pulled the trigger on acquiring Irish contractor Dornan. The second is, I guess, the cities that burn the biggest holes in construction contractors' wallets, basically most expensive cities to build in from a report that was released recently. And then finally, we're going to dive into the topic of contractors that have started this like trend of contractors starting to do their own software development to a degree, and building a bunch of these tools that they would need in-house. I guess diving first into the big topic, Dornan, which is an Irish construction contractor specializing really heavily in advanced technology type projects. So think data centers. They have been acquired by Turner Construction Group. So Turner is a subsidiary of Hochtief and Grupo ACS. Turner is the largest construction contractor in the US, turning over about 17 billion US dollars last year. They do have an international presence with projects in Asia. They've built like a whole bunch of, I think they built the Burj Khalifa.
They did like Madison Square Garden and the Yankee Stadium and things like that too. So like big public. Yeah.
The strategy here seems to be very much ride this kind of technological building wave and really take on the European contractors in their own backyard in the big wave of data center, battery plants, those types of projects that are increasingly where the spend is going. What do you think about this, Carlos?
Yeah, so I didn't actually know that much about Turner. They definitely seem like a traditional contractor. It's like commercial buildings, healthcare, education, infrastructure, industrial stuff, like all the normal things that a major tier one does, with a load of projects that people know and recognize. Dornan, data centers seems to be their thing. Complicated M&E fit out, but also renewables and pharma. So it definitely feels like a strategic buy in the places where every report says all the spend is for the next 5, 10, 20 years. So it makes a lot of sense. Dorner's not small, 1,500 employees. It's not a tiny company. And I think Turner was like 10,000. So it's quite a lift on the size of the company. I went quite deep. And this is not me claiming to be Sherlock Holmes by any extent. I was just clicking through Wikipedia. But obviously, so Turner, you mentioned, is owned by Hochtief.
Yeah.
They own 90% of CIMIC. I didn't know that. And then ACS Above, which is the Spanish company. This is probably you probably won't care about this, but I thought it was crazy. The chairman of ACS is Florentino Perez, who's the chairman of Real Madrid Football Club. He's like the biggest figure in football. So he runs both companies. He's worth like 3 billion. He's like, the Don of Spain. But I found that really interesting when I clicked all the way through to the chairman of Real Madrid.
That's fine. Yeah, I think that's super interesting. I think we want to encourage the one listener that also found that interesting to please write in and bond with Carlos over that really fun fact. For everyone else that's here for the construction stuff, so it's definitely big moves. Like this is pretty much one of the biggest construction contractors in the world buying they do, of the 17 billion in turnover, I think over 5 billion of that now is in data centers, EV battery plants, kind of advanced building. And so Dornan had, I think, just under a billion in revenue and 1 point something in forward order book. But with that like expertise that Turner has, giving them a brand to go and compete in the European market where it's definitely behind the development in US in that category. I would be, if I was a construction contractor hoping to ride the wave in Europe of that type of project, you would be increasingly nervous about the competition.
Yeah, for sure. It'd be interesting to see if they keep the Dornan brand or it gets consumed within Turner itself.
Guns ahead, what would you do?
I would keep the Dornan brand. If you've already got a name and a reputation for delivering projects in those sectors, to switch it out with a old school contractor name, I don't see the benefit of doing that. Like these data center projects, it's not like, like high speed 2 projects, you have to prove like your size and your capacity to deal with losing money just to win jobs, and the size helps. A data center, I can't imagine it's the same sort of thing. And your reputation and brand is probably going to get you in more with technology companies than government infrastructure schemes. But I think the combination of data center and renewables is a clever one as well, because like you look at the energy demands of these data centers, the renewable or clean energy side of construction is getting so big to match it because of all the commitments to emissions. So yeah, I actually think the focus is on data center, but I think the renewables is actually really strong as well, because I couldn't find any major examples from Turner in that space.
Yeah, I think that my guess is that they run the standard playbook, right? So the first thing is they acquire and then they keep the existing Dornan brand, and then after a certain time, it becomes like Dornan by Turner. You start introducing
Yeah.
that Turner brand.
Maybe
And
Tornin.
no, yeah, but it'd be like it'd be Dornan, and then the logo maybe changes to the Turner color, and then you normally have like a buy or a Turner Group company underneath the logo, and then at a certain point it'll get consumed into the brand. Once people got used to that buy Turner thing, it'll get consumed into the brand. It's like
Yeah,
we've seen it
and eventually it'll
times.
be American accents, so then all the Guinness switches to Coors Light or something.
Yeah, and then something about that football guy.
Yeah. You can Google his name after.
Yeah. Put that on the list of things I won't be doing. I guess actually, before we jump off this point, what do you think of the strategy of we talked about Hockteeth being part of ACS Group and owning a bunch of Turner. What do you think the strategy is for these kind of conglomerates that often have competing brands in the same market? So you'll see like Dornan, which is acquired by Turner, which is owned by Hockteeth, which is part of the ACS Group. Hockteeth also have their own division which build data centers in Europe. So it's like they've owned a direct competitor to themselves. And we've seen that in other markets. Like, for example, in the Australian market years ago, under the ACS Group, there were two of the three biggest contractors, or actually three of the biggest, like 5 contractors, were all under that same group, and they would compete against each other on bids for projects.
It's like the ultimate bet hedge. If you own all the ones competing in the space, you're going to win no matter what.
Yeah.
I guess it'll be interesting to know, and we're never going to know, how much influence Hockteeth would have over Turner in this acquisition. Like, does it really go back through the lines?
They own 90% of it, so I'd say quite a lot.
Yeah, but like you'd assume they'd have to like sign it off. But do you reckon direction comes, or do you reckon it's like a Turner idea? Then they have to go get approval for, rather than them saying, right, go buy these guys because we're playing chess at the top. And
I'd say a bit of column A, bit of column B.
Yeah.
You definitely end up with this dynamic where, okay, yeah, we're definitely like spreading our risk and opportunity. So, we could theoretically, we've got a couple of bets in we're betting on a couple of horses in the race. But you get this other funny dynamic, which is if you do too well and they both become quite strong competitors in the space, you can find yourself as 1 and 2 in the bid. And then you're being played off against yourself, which is a dynamic that used to happen in the Australian market where 2 contractors, so a Leighton Contractors and a John Holland, both owned by Hockteeth, would be bidding against each other. And ultimately, that dynamic would reduce the margin of Hockteef in the end.
Because it's too big, you're then called a monopoly, and then you get your own issues from that.
Yeah, 100%. And oftentimes there has to be that kind of these barriers, because if there's collusion, it's kind of like collusion behavior, you get exactly that problem. So it'd be interesting to see what happens in that space and whether there is any kind of internal merging like we saw recently with Dragados and Flatiron in the US. Very good. Right, let's jump on to the second topic, which was your favorite topic because it's to do with costs and things being expensive. Sorry, that's a QS joke, not a you like expensive things joke. I'll do that one later.
Thanks for clarifying.
So Arcadis, which are sort of an international consultancy, released their international construction costs, which they've abbreviated to the ICC report.
Nice.
Because construction must abbreviate. The 2024 report, which basically published the top most expensive cities in the world to build in. And in a surprise to no one, London won.
Hey. Well, more wildly, Bristol is 10th. Bristol. Like, that does not make sense.
Small sample size. That one job went massively over budget.
Yeah. I didn't know HS2 went through Bristol. Yeah.
What are your takeaways from looking at the report?
So obviously it's not that surprising. London's overtaken Geneva. Geneva's like, bearing in mind I live in London, I go to Geneva and I realise that London's not that expensive. You get a Big Mac meal for 25 euros and you're like, ooh, like that's the bar they've set.
Whoa.
So most of the top 10, like half of them are British, American, Swiss. Like, and that makes a lot of sense with Copenhagen, Hong Kong, which have always been expensive. Digging into more, I guess, the why outside of the usual like inflation and availability of labor and all the obvious things that we know are factors. One seems to be specifications and specifically standards for building safety and sustainability. I guess in that space, and nothing, Australia does not feature on the list of the most expensive.
We just didn't send our paperwork in for reporting the cost yet.
yeah. Too chill to be to do that. But no, is there, from working in both markets, would you say there's a massive difference in?
Yeah, there's a wild difference.
Yeah?
Yeah. We went and visited a project in the UK years ago for a site tour, and the amount of work that was happening on site, I thought it was like a public holiday, and then was shocked when I was told by the team that no, that was actually like a normal day at work. Yeah, it's wildly different.
Okay, fine.
I think like you said, there's the trends in the list are definitely, big cities are expensive to build in. That's like, I guess, a shocker to nobody.
The aspect of congested sites, like you can see why that has such an effect, especially when you look at the surrounding area.
Certainly. The other trend is like 12 of the top 20 are in Europe. And I think that should be something that worries folks in Europe. So if you're thinking about it, if you zoom out at like a macro level, if these if the 12 of top 20 being in Europe are symptomatic of some things that aren't just idiosyncratic to large cities, for example, Edinburgh, it's a city, Birmingham, but it's not like a massive city. That gives you a bit of a taste that there's something more than just the big city effect happening there in Europe. If you're the government or someone that's funding and building infrastructure across that market, I guess it's a worrying sign, because every pound, euro, dollar, franc, whatever currency you're spending in, every extra one of those that you're spending on a project that you have to build because you're building in one of these places like in Europe that is more expensive is pound, euro, dollar, franc that you don't have to build the next thing that you want to build. And that problem compounds. And if you compare Europe to a US or a China, for every dollar you're spending, that other market can go and build two things for the price of your one, or 1.5 things for the price of your one. That compounds day on day on day and year on year on year. And you start to get a really big effect in terms of, the growth of the market and the cost of that, the real cost of that, I guess, expensive nature of building. I think it's a worrying sign. I think it should be something that the classic statement, it should be something that someone does something about.
100%. And just like a business investment point of view, like it must be really off-putting when you see the cost and you're thinking about where to locate or relocate to. I think one thing that seemed to be a bit of a trend was land shortages. So particularly like countries like the Netherlands, some of these densely populated small countries in Europe. Yeah, everything's been pumped up by the fact that you're paying over the odds for the land in the first place, or removing the structure that was there. There's not a lot of greenfield or I guess brownfield like the US and China. So the land grab aspect seems to be quite big. Throw in the sort of safety and sustainability standards, accelerates that cost. And then when you throw in, like in the UK, obviously we won't mention the B word, but labor shortages, like the cost of,
you can swear on this podcast if
you want. That like double down on everything below. So you can see why London's at the top, but it is definitely worrying that it's the rest of Europe too. So it's not solely a Brexit thing.
Yeah, and to be fair, Australia does rank on the list, mate. We have 48, 51 and 54, Sydney, Brisbane and Melbourne. But definitely the top half of the list is dominated by European cities.
Yeah. I was just fact checking you on something there where you said, Birmingham's not a big city. I was thinking it's probably bigger than Brisbane.
Right, I would pause the podcast. Yeah, but I also didn't claim Brisbane was a big city. Like, just saying on.
Yeah, but it's like, they're similar size. No, I'll take that back. It's the third biggest city, though, right? In like the southern hemisphere. No,
what is
on that side anyway? Brisbane.
What?
Is it third biggest in APAC? No, APAC covers Singapore, I think, doesn't it?
Brisbane. I think you're confusing Brisbane with New York or some place that is actually a big city. It's not big at all.
Down that way. Down under, I meant.
Yeah, if you exclude all the big cities in Australia, it's the biggest. If that's what we're...
Yeah. It is the third biggest in Australia, though, right? After Sydney and Melbourne?
Right, well, we'll just crack on while the Googling happens.
Hey,
so we'll jump to the... It's third biggest?
Topic. Yeah,
okay, cool.
Third biggest.
Cool. Final thing that we had on the list was, I guess, this trend that's not statistically demonstrated, but anecdotally, this trend that seems to be picking up pace over recent years. Large construction contractors wanting to quote unquote digitize and digitally transform and, you know, all those words, and taking the approach of building systems themselves using low or no code tools or platforms. You know, something that we're seeing more and more. I had 2 conversations with contractors doing exactly that in the last 5 days, walking through with the teams doing it exactly how they're doing it. Is it something that you're seeing as well? And what do you think is behind it?
So I come across it quite a lot, and in, I guess, a positive and a negative manner. If we separate the cost for now, we'll come back to that, and that being like maybe a driver in decision making. There are certain, let's just call them forms and things like that, which seem perfectly suitable and reasonable for a contractor to use, like Power Apps or something for in-house. They own it, they control it, people use it, they collect data, and it works for them. But like low complexity forms and things like that. So that makes a lot of sense to me. And contractors do now have teams in place that do things like Power BI dashboards and things in-house already, that they're not buying this experience to build that form. It's like a bolt-on to a team that already exists. So it makes sense. When you move into the complexity or complex tools, it starts to get very muddy for me, because ultimately someone's making a decision probably based on cost. Like, it's hard to think that isn't the key driver. Build teams in-house outside of the skill set that a contractor typically has, to not just build a tool, but to maintain a tool and to keep it up to speed with market. Because if anyone says, right, it's going to cost this to build this tool now, in 10 years, it's gone 100%. At the rate things are moving now, within 24 months, it will be obsolete. So you're not making a commitment to building a tool. You're making a commitment to grow a product team almost forever or indefinitely, because there's no way that the value for money exercise works unless you run that up for 10 plus years or whatever that calculation turns out to be. So it seems like a very odd thing to do. I've seen a couple of contractors actually go and build it and then discontinue it because the market has overtaken that tool, and teams then say, well, why are we using this if the market is so far ahead? And then you're left looking like a bit of a goose, because you've spent all that money and you haven't realized the value because it was only used for a certain amount of time. So yeah, some people may underappreciate the time and effort it takes to not just build a tool, but keep it current and support it. So I think 9 times out of 10, building a complex tool in-house feels like a bad choice.
To take the other side of that, you could see that there's this dynamic where construction is, I guess, a little bit later to the party than other industries in terms of adoption of technology. And that gives them this benefit of seeing how that's happened in the other industries. Specifically, you get this behavior that can happen in other industries where people adopt a tool or a platform or whatever, and the goal of the platform is to lock them into that through pricing, through UX patterns, through integration, a whole bunch of things. Getting off that platform in the future can also be near impossible for a contractor to do. They have to do another like digital transformation to get off the previous digital transformation. The vendor risk is almost the same risk as the build it yourself risk, because if you don't pick the right vendor, or that vendor decides, actually, we've now won some percentage of the market and it doesn't make sense to keep investing, we should just rake in the cabbage, then you've got this similar problem that you're modeling out for building it yourself. The other thing that's interesting is so many software platforms, all of the hard work is inventing the paradigm or the dynamic of how it should work. And you could take anything and replicate it for a tenth of the cost. Like you could rebuild Twitter today for peanuts, right? You could rebuild. So whatever the platform is, there's so much sunk cost that the software vendor wants to amortize in their pricing model and extract over this long-term relationship with customers, that you could basically copy a lot of it in a low or no code tool, exactly as you said, provided it's not like complicated in its user interaction. So forms are primo, right? Everyone's building their internal docket system. Everyone's building their internal diary system. Everyone's building anything that's like a form-based process, because you can quite easily get a form working in Power Apps, in ServiceNow, in whatever low or no code tool you're going to use. Yeah, you don't have the sunk cost of the software vendor that you're trying to recover, and you can build it your way. Yeah.
Yeah. It by the way, I think you just invented a new phrase, which is raking the cabbage. I don't know if I've just never heard that before. Yeah, I think it kind of touches on the agility aspect. So before, without these sort of low or no code solutions, you were building something and you had the cost and you had to do the commitment, which means you're kind of pushed to stick with that decision to realize the value. With these low or no code solutions and the simple form type thing, it makes sense because you can change it in a second, right? Provided you've got one or two people that can.
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah. But if we look at the complex solutions, I still would be surprised if switching vendor because a vendor goes down the wrong path in terms of the product or doesn't deliver what they promised is probably still a fraction of the cost of building a complex tool in-house. So I think personally I can get over the hurdle of, because even imagine like the journey you go through as a product, which is like understanding what the market wants, and there's more ideas you have to say no to than yes to. Imagine doing that in-house, and every director's like has to do this, and they go,
building
cool,
something new in-house. So if the company comes and says, here's a set of like open-ended requirements or requirements for a new thing we want to build, that's probably, in my view, a really bad idea to try and do and like invent the new software paradigm. But I had a conversation in person with two contractors, like literally in the last 3 days. Both of them are like, we're purchasing software A or software B, and we're spending hundreds of thousands of dollars a year, and it's a form and a this and a that, and actually we can build the whole thing in-house, and thanks to them we can copy almost everything that's built into their product and customize the bits that annoy us. And so that's what's going to happen. That's the rules of the game. And so software vendors need to solve the hard problems, not just the easy bit, and try and, I guess, lock customers into the product. There's very clear benefit for taking on the hard problems that can't be solved easily, because that's where the real value is generated, I think.
And you'd assume that there's the difficult problems that you need to solve in these applications, but also the connectivity between these applications will then accelerate them to a level that you just can't match.
And you got to keep moving. You got to keep adding the next benefit and the next benefit that just makes it really clear as to why someone shouldn't go and try and build it, because by the time they build it, you'll be 7 steps ahead. No, that was super interesting. I really like the new format. I'm very happy. I don't know if it's a new format, but I'm really happy that we couldn't decide on the one of the 3 topics. All 3 of them were interesting. Carlos, thank you, mate. Why don't you read us out?
Yeah, no, and also I think the 3 topics also really helps the fact that we have surface level knowledge in 3 areas that we can talk about for less amount of time. But yeah, no, thank you very much, everyone, for tuning into today's show. If you enjoyed today's episode, please do like or the video or follow us on your chosen platform. We really do appreciate your support, and we'll see you next week.
I'm off to Google the moon base.
Yeah.